Good afternoon, and thanks for joining us at 4. Also streaming, it is primary day, and we are just hours away from knowing which names will be on the ballot in November. We have team coverage this afternoon watching the key races. We begin with the primary for the next Minnesota governor and Raya Katene. Raya.
Well, Rena, this is where U.S. Senator Amy Klobuchar and her supporters will be watching those election results pour in tonight. But we know it's not going to be very long for us to be able to call this race. It is almost certain that Klobuchar will be the Democratic nominee for Minnesota governor. But what we are keeping a close eye on is this bigger battle that's unfolding across the political aisle with who is vying to be the Republican nominee. House Speaker Lisa Demuth, businessman Kendall Qualls, and MyPillow founder Mike Lindell. Demuth currently has the most funding behind her, but Qualls is endorsed by the Minnesota GOP, while Lindell has the endorsement from President Trump. So this primary will tell us a lot about where Minnesota Republicans stand on their loyalty to the president and the MAGA movement. A political scientist tells me the fact that the state GOP did not endorse Lindell could actually help him out, which is what we are seeing reflected in the polls.
It might be helping him because he's now perceived as being the outsider to the Republican Party, much in the same way that Donald Trump was perceived to be the outsider to the Republican Party back in 2016.
And even if he did get the state's party endorsement, Schultz tells me the party no longer has the resources, the money, or the influence that it once did. Now, although the three Republicans do have some different approaches to some key conservative issues, they do all say that they want to tackle the issue of fraud in the state, and they say that they want to make Minnesota more affordable by lowering taxes. We also know that Klobuchar says she wants to take on the fraud issue as well, and we are expecting to hear from her once the polls close here at 8 o'clock tonight. Back to you.
All right, Raya. Thank you. Danny Spiewak joining us now with the highly anticipated primary race to replace Democratic Senator Tina Smith. Danny.
Marina, if Democrats want any prayer of taking back the U.S. Senate this fall, they have to hold the state of Minnesota. And that's why there is so much national attention and interest on tonight's primary in Minnesota about which direction voters in the primary are going to go. Are they going to go with Lieutenant Governor Peggy Flanagan or Congresswoman Angie Craig as their nominee for U.S. Senate in November? Lieutenant Governor Flanagan is considered the progressive candidate in this race. She supports policies like Medicare for All and universal child care. And she has the endorsements of the national progressive figures like Senators Bernie Sanders and Elizabeth Warren. But Congresswoman Angie Craig calls herself a pragmatic progressive, and she points to her 4 straight U.S. House victories over Republicans in a moderate district, the 2nd congressional district south of the Twin Cities. She claims she's the more electable candidate against Republicans in November. So we got a chance to talk with both campaigns in the final days as they were heading into the home stretch this weekend.
I've got a long track record of working on behalf of Minnesota's children and families, leading the charge to increase the minimum wage and index it to inflation in this state, paid family and medical leave.
I'm certainly making the contrast that I'm the experienced person in Washington who has a track record already of taking on Donald Trump and getting bills passed that make a difference in Minnesotans' lives.
But there are some key vulnerabilities that each candidate has with Democratic primary voters tonight. For Craig, that is a past vote she took on one of President Trump's top immigration bills last year, the Lake and Riley Act, which she now says she regrets. For Lieutenant Governor Peggy Flanagan, it's the fraud issue, being the second in command under Governor Walz with the fraud crisis in the state. So to what extent voters decide to factor that into their decisions remains to be seen tonight. Back to you.
Definitely a very interesting race there, Danny. We'll check back in with you, throughout the evening. And for the first time in decades, the Minnesota GOP has had a competitive primary for Senate. Jennifer Hoff joining us now with the latest on that race. Jennifer?
Rena, we are live tonight at the GOP headquarters in Edina, and perhaps this race would have been considered a toss-up perhaps several months ago when the state party endorsed veteran Adam Schwarzy at the conventions. But since then, former NFL sideline reporter Michelle Tafoya is now up by more than 30 points, according to U of M political analyst Larry Jacobs. And if Tafoya, in fact, goes on to win tonight, it will be the first time that the party's endorsed candidate doesn't win. The 4-time Emmy Award-winning sideline reporter supports deporting any immigrant convicted of fraud, as well as fewer taxes, all energy sources, and the SAVE Act that requires citizenship to vote. Jacob says that Schwarzy just doesn't have that name recognition or available cash, while the other familiar name in this race, Royce White, doesn't have enough broad support beyond President Trump's base.
Republicans have been on a losing streak in statewide races for several decades. And here's a race with Michelle Tafoya, a national rock star in the Republican ranks, who looks to have a good chance.
And there's this to note too. Michelle Tafoya is one of several candidates who are running this race with no political experience. And Republicans also think that they might have quite a shot this time around because whoever wins would be going against somebody who is not an incumbent, and that is Flanagan or Craig in this case. And if they were to go on to win in November, would be huge, because the last time that a Republican held a congressional Senate seat, Rena, would have been Norm Coleman, and that was nearly 25 years ago. So certainly something we'll continue to watch as the evening unfolds.
Absolutely.
Back to you from headquarters.
Thanks, Jennifer. Federal election observers checked in on a number of polling places in Minneapolis while watched by state observers. Our KARE 11 crew spotted 2 outside the Powderhorn Recreation Center this afternoon. They didn't talk to people as they walked in, but they did ask people how voting went when they walked out. Hennepin and Ramsey counties denied federal observers to be inside those polling places, which is within their rights. So they had to be 100 feet away and outside. An election judge at Powderhorn came out to check who they were and then provided a map of where they could go.
But I do have the map for you guys for your 100 feet. I guess campaigning is the whole part. You guys are fine outside of that 100 feet.
So like halfway down the steps?
Don't go into the pond. They're with.
I want to go in the pond.
I know, right?
The 2 federal observers were only at Powderhorn for a few minutes, talked with a couple of people, found no issues, and then went on to their next polling place. Yesterday, Minnesota's Secretary of State said he would be sending state observers to watch those federal observers. And Secretary of State Steve Simon was at the polls to cast his vote this morning and did comment on the federal observers.
There's no question that Operation Metro Surge changed a lot of attitudes and caused a lot of skepticism and even anxiety in some places about a federal presence in Minnesota. So I understand that skepticism. I understand that anxiety. And that's one of the reasons why the Attorney General's office is providing the observers who are observing the observers.
Simon adds that he is hoping to see at least a 23% voter turnout rate today, which is the primary voting attendance record in Minnesota that was set back in 2018. Polls are open until 8 o'clock tonight. If you'd like to vote but are not registered, you can do so on site. To learn more about the candidates or what to bring with you to the polls, check out our voter's guide. You'll find that at kare11.com/vote. And be sure to join KARE 11 tonight on air and streaming on our app. Starting at 8 o'clock, we're going to bring you live primary results as new numbers come in late into the evening, plus political in-depth analysis.